Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week's video we're going to be upcycling some home decor items as requested by you. I created a couple of these copper patina vases with like a faux verdigris effect on them, and they actually did much better than I expected on my social media platforms, and you voted for me to create a longer video. So that's what I'm doing. I went to my local charity shop to see if I could find a vase. You can see the outcome of that shopping trip if you want to on my social media channels. And I managed to pick this one up for £1.95. Now, normally vases are a little bit more expensive than that to buy, but it's got a chip in the very top, so I think that's why it was cheap. But it's a really good size. We can repair that chip because we're going to be painting it anyway, so stay tuned to find out how I put that effect on this. Okay, this is the third time I've recorded the voiceover for this video, and it's because I've got a new microphone which is very sensitive, so I need to use my indoor voice, not my outdoor voice, because it was too loud and it was horrendous, in fact. So hopefully this works. If it doesn't and I'm shouting and it's very loud, I apologise. Anyway, I took the price sticker off the vase to begin with, and then I cleaned it using a solution of Dixie Belle's White Lightning with water in a spray bottle. Sprayed that all over the piece, and that is because even things like oils on your fingers can result in poor adhesion of your primer, which we're going to get onto in a second. And then I rinsed it all over with just plain tap water and another paper towel. I'm really annoyed I've had to record this again because I did say some really good jokes that I've forgotten. So if I have got no more jokes in me, it's because I'm all joked out on my previous voiceovers, which I've had to delete and redo. Anyway, Slick Stick. This is an adhesion primer, and this is what is going to allow us to paint vases. So if you've got a really shiny surface like glass, plastic, metal, laminate, anything that's really slippery and shiny, which paint would ordinarily struggle to stick to, this is what you need. It's a water-based primer. Don't shout. Indoor voice. Soft indoor voice. It's a water-based primer, and like I say, it allows you to paint slick surfaces. You need to do 2 coats of this primer. That's what the instruction says. That's what I've always done, and it's never ever let me down. Also, after you've done 2 coats, you need to wait 24 hours for this to dry before you apply your paint. As you can see, I did the bottom of the vase first, and that's because I don't have to then keep turning it over and risk kind of putting my hand in wet paint or primer as it was. So I always do the base first and get that out of the way and done with. I also sped up the drying process with a hairdryer. Don't normally recommend, but in this circumstance I did. Just make sure that you put your hairdryer evenly all over the piece and don't concentrate it on one particular area, because you can cause your primer to bubble. So this step is actually a step that I didn't do on the vases that I showed on my social media channels, and that is to apply a base of chalk mineral paint. This is the colour Coffee Bean, which is a really dark, rich brown. As you can see, coverage is amazing over that white primer, and it's not really a step that you needed to do because obviously it's a step that I didn't do on my last vases, but I actually prefer the outcome of this. It just adds a real richness to the kind of metallic paint, which again we'll get to in a second. So then I repaired. This is because I've done 3 voiceovers. I can't get my words out. I repaired the chip with Dixie Mud in brown, and then just sanded it smooth once it was dry, and then took a microfiber cloth and removed the dust off the surface, because otherwise that's going to get caught up in our paint and give a bitty texture. I want some texture, but I don't want too much texture on this. Now we can get on to the metallic paint. So again, if you don't want the brown paint stage, you can go straight from the primer, the white primer, straight to this stage. As long as you've waited the 24 hours for the primer to dry, you can go straight to the metallic paint stage, or you can add a base coat of brown. It's completely up to you. The outcome is very, very similar, I've got to say. So this is a combination of 2 colours from the Patina range from Dixie Belle Paint, and one is copper, one is bronze. One is a little bit more orangey, coppery, one is a little bit more browny, bronzy, and I like to use both to give a little bit of tonal variation on the surface. They are super similar, but again, you could just use one if you wanted to. It gives a very similar outcome. And I'm using it to, I'm using a sponge to apply them. Again, can't get my words out. Third time round with this voiceover, and I'm really trying hard not to shout and use my indoor voice still. So if I get carried away at any point and I get a little bit loud, I apologise. So I applied the paint with the sponge to get complete coverage over the piece, and then I let that dry completely. This stage is really technical. Are you ready? I'm going to use paper to apply my turquoise paint, and that's going to give us that verdigris kind of look. Told you it was technical. So this paper is actually packaging paper from a parcel, and I always keep it because it always comes in handy for something. That was an email. Does this voiceover want to go any worse? I'm not going to start again because I can't at this stage. We can't do 3 voiceovers. So please excuse the ding in the background. That was just me getting an email to my laptop whilst I'm doing a voiceover. Thank you very much for that. So moving swiftly on, I'm applying the turquoise paint with some scrunched up brown paper. I have tested a few different methods of applying this, and I personally think this is the best way. I always take off the excess turquoise paint on the side of the plate so that you don't put a load of turquoise paint all at once. This look relies heavily on a kind of layered look. So to begin with, you might think that this is looking like a hot mess express, and you'd be correct, but you do have to trust the process. So you just need to add the layers very gently and slowly. It's a slow process. I will be speeding some of this up. Don't worry, we're not going to do it real time because you'd be sat here for days. So I'm going to speed it up and show you how I kind of laid this up. Terra clay paint works really well because it dries super quick, and you can layer it without it kind of reactivating too much, as long as you're fairly gentle how you tap it. So as you can see, I'm just playing around with the placement there, and then I let it dry. So I came back to it again and repeated that step and just added more turquoise because I wanted obviously the coverage of the turquoise to be heavier in some areas and then the copper to come through in other areas. I'm using a new piece of paper as well, because the old one, it starts to disintegrate and kind of get a little bit kind of mushed up. So I'm using a new piece of paper, and again I'm just starting to layer up that turquoise and make it a more intense colour around the centre, which is where I wanted more of the turquoise to be. I told you I'd speed it up a little bit because it does get boring watching it over and over again in real time, but it really depends on the shape of your vase and your personal preference to how much turquoise you add and where you add it to. And I'm also going in with a bit of copper paint here because I did go a little bit crazy with the turquoise, not going to lie. It started to take over. So again, this process is very kind of organic, and you can kind of make it up as you go along. If you notice, I do pause slightly in between kind of layers and just sit back and look at the placement and make sure it kind of looks okay. I don't want it too symmetrical, but I don't want it to look too forced either. So I just kept adding a little bit of copper, dabbing a bit of copper on. As you can see, it covers up the turquoise perfectly. And I think when you do this and layer the colours over the top of one another, it does look more kind of authentic. I know we're creating a faux finish. I know it's not really verdigris, but I do think it looks a little bit more authentic than if you were to just add that band of turquoise across the centre and call it a day. Talking about turquoise across the centre, I let that last layer dry, and then I decided I wanted the turquoise to be slightly higher up the neck and lower down. I felt like that band around the centre just didn't look quite right. Again, this can change depending on your personal preference and the shape of the vase. This is obviously a rounded vase, so I feel like it could take a little bit more of the turquoise higher up the neck. But again, I've done vases where I've hardly put any turquoise on at all. I've shared them on my social media platforms if you want to have a look. And I've put hardly any turquoise on at all and mainly kept it copper. So it really depends on the look that you want. and the kind of how much turquoise versus how much copper you want on your vase. Once I was happy with the turquoise, I started to get pieces of paper that were smaller. So obviously the smaller your surface area of the paper, the more precise you can be with the placement of your paint. So as you can see, the turquoise crept up quite high on the neck, and I just want to bring that copper back out because it kind of got covered a little bit with the turquoise and it's kind of looking a little bit hazy and lost. So where I want the copper to be really prominent, I just added that as a final step, and that's going to give me that nice contrast between the copper and the turquoise. And then once you're happy with your placement of your copper and your turquoise, you need to seal it. So you can use any of Dixie Belle's clear coats or Gator Hide, depending on the level protection and the level of sheen you want. Because I've used Terra clay paint, I'm using Terra Tuff. That's because Terra needs a specialist top coat so that it doesn't basically reactivate when you apply it, and doesn't start pulling the turquoise paint off, because that's the last thing you want, having built up all those gorgeous layers and the placement of it. You don't want to start reactivating it. So I'm using Terra Tuff, and that's going to give me a really nice sheen as well, which is going to make the metallic really nice and kind of light reflective to give that nice kind of sheen. But if you wanted a matte finish, you could do that. If you wanted to use Gator Hide, you could do that. And then the final thing is to add black wax, because you know I use coloured wax in pretty much every single project that I do. And again, this is just going to add a little bit of kind of depth to the colours and add that kind of patina-y kind of look. If you wanted it extra grungy, you could leave the black wax heavier, but I just wanted to add a little bit of subtle kind of depth to this, so I moved the excess with a lint-free rag and just left it sitting in all the little bits of texture. As always, I'm going to give you a couple of close-up shots so you can see the layers and the very, very subtle texture where all the black wax has been kind of sitting in those areas. And then the final shot as well. I hope I've kept my voice to a suitable level and we haven't got too shouty at any point. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.